You check your credit card app. The balance is red. It always is. Somewhere across town, a man just borrowed $2 million. He's smiling. That's not a coincidence. That's the entire game, and nobody explained the rules to you. You were taught one thing about debt: avoid it. Pay it off. Never touch it again. But the richest people on the planet do the opposite. They borrow more than most people will earn in a lifetime, and it makes them richer, not poorer. So what do they know that you don't? Here's the first thing: not all debt is the same animal wearing the same coat. Robert Kiyosaki, in his book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, split money you owe into two categories that most schools never mention. Bad debt is money you borrow to buy something that loses value the moment you own it. A car, a vacation, a new phone on a payment plan. The debt stays. The value disappears. Good debt is different. Good debt is money you borrow to buy something that pays you back more than it costs. A rental property that generates income every month. A business loan that funds equipment which produces revenue. Even a stock portfolio bought with borrowed capital if the returns outpace the interest. Same word, opposite outcome. And almost nobody draws that line for you before you sign your first loan. Now here's where it gets interesting. This isn't theory. Look at how Warren Buffett actually built Berkshire Hathaway. Buffett didn't just pick great stocks. He used something called float premiums collected from insurance policies. Money that technically belongs to policyholders, but sits in Berkshire's accounts for years before any claim is paid out. That float is borrowed money, interest-free in most years. Buffett invested it. The gains stayed his. This is one of the most successful uses of leverage in financial history, and it's built entirely on debt most people never think to call debt. Let that sit for a second. The most cautious investor alive, a man famous for warning people about risk, built his empire on borrowed money. The difference wasn't whether he used debt. The difference was what he pointed it at. So let's walk through what actually happens when a wealthy person takes out a loan versus when you do. You get approved for a car loan. The bank hands you $40,000. You drive off the lot, and the second you do that, car loses value. A year later, you owe more than the car's worth. The debt didn't build anything. It just gave you a shrinking asset and a growing bill. Now picture an investor getting approved for the same $40,000, except they put it toward a down payment on a rental property worth $200,000. They didn't pay for the house, the bank did. Tenants pay the mortgage through rent. The property appreciates over time. In 10 years, the investor has an asset worth far more than what they borrowed, and someone else's monthly payments built it for them. Same tool, same bank, same interest rate maybe. Completely different result, because one loan bought a liability and the other loan bought a cash-flowing asset. Here's the counterintuitive twist, and it's the part that breaks people's brains the first time they hear it. Paying off every debt as fast as possible isn't always the smart move. Sometimes it makes you poorer. If you have a mortgage at 4% interest, and you can invest that same money in an index fund that historically returns closer to 8 or 9% a year, rushing to pay down the mortgage early is leaving money on the table. You're paying off cheap debt with money that could have grown at a faster rate somewhere else. The math isn't emotional, it's just math. But most people never run the numbers because they were taught that all debt is dangerous, full stop, no exceptions. That doesn't mean debt is free of risk. It very much isn't. The 2008 financial crisis is the warning label on all of this. Millions of people and institutions borrowed against assets, mainly homes that were wildly overvalued using debt structures nobody fully understood, called mortgage-backed securities, which were essentially bundles of thousands of home loans sold off as investments. When home prices dropped, the debt didn't drop with them. People owed more than their homes were worth, banks collapsed, and the world economy nearly went with them. That crisis wasn't proof that debt is evil. It was proof that debt used on overpriced, poorly understood assets with no cushion for things going wrong is a loaded weapon pointed at your own future. The rich who survived and thrived after 2008 weren't the ones avoiding debt. They were the ones who understood exactly what they were borrowing against and built in room for the market to be wrong. So what's the actual difference between how the rich use debt and how most people use it? 3 things. First, they borrow to acquire assets that generate income, not liabilities that generate bills. Second, they calculate the spread what the debt costs them in interest versus what the money can earn elsewhere before they ever sign anything. Third, they never borrow past what they can survive if the plan goes wrong. They leave room for bad years because bad years always come eventually. Compare that to the average borrowing pattern. A credit card for things that are gone by the time the bill arrives. A car loan for a depreciating box on wheels. Financing decisions made on monthly payment size instead of total cost or total return. Nobody teaches you to ask, what does this debt buy me and will it pay for itself? So you don't ask, you just sign. Thomas Stanley spent years researching actual millionaires for his book, The Millionaire Next Door, and one of his sharpest findings was that most wealthy people are far more disciplined with debt than the public assumes, not debt-free necessarily, but deliberate. They don't avoid leverage, they interrogate it. Every dollar borrowed has a job to do, and if it can't do that job, it doesn't get borrowed. Think about your own relationship with debt for a second. Is it working for you while you sleep, or is it just quietly draining you every single month? Is it attached to something that grows, or something that's already shrinking the moment you drive it off the lot? That's the mirror. The wealthy aren't smarter than you. They aren't luckier most of the time. They just learn to ask one question before borrowing that you were never taught to ask. What is this debt actually buying me? You check your credit card app again. The balance is still red. But maybe for the first time you're asking why it's red and whether the next dollar you borrow is going to work for you or just quietly work against you.